In this video, we venture into the breathtaking landscapes of Utah, a state with stories as rich and varied as its scenery. From tales of Spanish gold buried deep in the canyons to hidden caches left behind by outlaws, Utah's history is filled with legends of lost treasures waiting to be found. In this special compilation, we've gathered some of the most captivating treasure stories from Utah, adapted from classic treasure magazines of the past. Each tale invites you to explore the mystery, adventure, and history behind Utah's most elusive riches. Enjoy. Utah's Sinbad Desert, a place of breathtaking beauty and unforgiving harshness, stands as a testament to nature's formidable power. In this desolate wasteland, the preciousness of water is evident, as the few wells that exist are a product of relentless human labor. The very emptiness of the desert, its vast and desolate nature, forms the core of its allure. Today, only a brave few dare to tread upon its unforgiving terrain, heeding the warnings of government signs that emphasize the importance of ample gasoline and water supplies. Yet, it is this very isolation that conceals a valuable treasure within its heart. Situated in southeastern Utah, between Castle Dale and the Colorado River, the Sinbad Desert bears witness to a storied past. Once a bustling stage for notorious bandit gangs, including the infamous Butch Cassidy's Wild Bunch, the desert now stands as a tranquil and solitary expanse. The allure of the desert for outlaws lay in the old Spanish Trail, a humble dirt road connecting Green River, Castle Dale, and Farron in present times. However, in its heyday, this frontier thoroughfare served as a vital artery for communication between the East and West, carrying precious cargo even after the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad. Many of these outlaws migrated to the Sinbad from Brown's Hole, a secretive hideout nestled on the border of Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming. With 10 cabins providing sanctuary for gang members, Brown's Hole offered an ideal refuge, allowing the outlaws to vanish into neighboring states at the first hint of approaching lawmen. Evidently, the neighboring states did not share a spirit of cooperation, rendering the outlaws nearly immune to the long arm of the law. In the tumultuous 1880s, George Leroy Parker, better known as the notorious Butch Cassidy, led his band of outlaws from the infamous Brown's Hole to carve out a new sanctuary amidst the rugged terrain of the Sinbad Desert. Nestled within the eastern reaches of Wayne County, they christened this impenetrable stronghold as Robber's Roost, a haven concealed by sheer cliffs and labyrinthine box canyons. From this bastion, the Wild Bunch, the McCarty Gang, the Blue Mountain Gang, and other notorious groups sallied forth to pillage trains, wayfarers, and banks in the vicinity. For nearly 2 decades, until the turn of the century, these brazen gangs operated with near impunity, met only occasionally with resistance during their daring heists. Once ensconced within the impregnable walls of Robber's Roost, they basked in absolute safety, evading the pursuit of any lawman daring enough to challenge them within their fortress. Over time, these audacious bands amassed considerable riches, stashing away their ill-gotten gains in hidden caches scattered throughout the surrounding hills. Fast forward to 1966, when I found myself embroiled in a clandestine hunt for treasure near the fabled Robber's Roost. Until now, the whereabouts of this cache have remained shrouded in secrecy. Following 3 arduous expeditions into the desert, my partner and I finally pinpointed the elusive treasure site in the scorching summer of 1969. Regrettably, lacking the essential metal detecting equipment crucial for unearthing the treasure's exact location, we found ourselves unable to complete the quest. Thus, I share this tale in the fervent hope that a more equipped and patient soul will yet discover the hidden spoils. The origins of this tale trace back to the verdant forests of Oregon in 1910, where a logging enterprise was overseen by a former denizen of Robber's Roost. Veiled in mystery, his enigmatic past remained largely unknown until the day he summoned his foreman, a certain baker, and began to regale him with reminiscences of his bygone days in the untamed lands of Utah. "I've grown fond of you," the weathered old man began, his gaze reminiscent of times long past. "I reckon it's time I shared with you the whereabouts of a trove of gold and silver nestled in the heart of Utah. It's a fortune that can set you up for life." The old man proceeded to spin a yarn about his band of miscreants and their stashing away of riches atop a mesa in the desolate desert. Their final escapade saw them pocketing 10 gleaming silver bars from a daring robbery. With the law hot on their heels, they sought refuge at the mesa, burying the silver alongside their other ill-gotten gains. With a somber tone, the old man confided in Baker, revealing that he was the last surviving member of the gang. "There were 10 of us," he recounted. 8 met their end in Utah, and the 9th met his fate at my hands in Oregon, following a dispute some years back. I'm the sole survivor. The treasure lay hidden atop one of 2 identical mesas that rose from the sprawling flatlands. The telltale marker for the cache was a lake adorning the mesa's summit. Beneath the waters of this ephemeral lake, fed only by rain, lay the accumulated spoils from 15 years of lawless exploits. The old man concluded his tale with a cautionary note, forewarning Baker that claiming the treasure would be no mean feat. Years elapsed before Baker could embark on the quest for the treasure. In 1914, he enlisted in the nascent Army Air Corps, mastering the art of piloting a plane. Following World War I, he confided in a comrade about Robber's Roost and the hidden riches. Together, they pooled their resources and acquired an aircraft, aiming to land it beside the mesas. Before setting off for Utah, Baker divulged the details of the treasure to his elder brother, a respected family man with a flourishing business in New Jersey. Alas, the youthful Baker and his companion vanished without a trace, presumed to have met their end somewhere amidst the unforgiving desert, their fate forever shrouded in mystery. 3 years later, the older Baker showed up in Farron, Utah, a sleepy farming town on the edge of the desert. Anyone who would move from the east to Farron completely mystified the townspeople. The mystery deepened when they learned Baker had sold his business and home in New Jersey before moving. Baker asked everyone he met who was most familiar with the desert. The answer was always the same old Williams, the sheep herder. For 50 years, Williams had driven his sheep back and forth across the Sinbad to find grazing land. He knew the desert better than anyone else. A year after he arrived in Farron, Baker approached Williams with a proposition. "Lead me to the mesas and we'll split the treasure," Baker said. William agreed, and together they made a series of trips to the twin mesas. The steep walls of the mesas repulsed their efforts to reach the top. They needed to blast a new trail with dynamite. Williams purchased the explosives, and they prepared for a final assault. On the eve of their departure, Baker had a heart attack and died in Williams' home. After the funeral, the Baker family collected their belongings and returned to New Jersey. Williams, determined to find the treasure, made several trips to the mesas. Before he could realize his dream, however, he was thrown from a horse, sustaining a back injury that halted his treasure hunting days forever. The dynamite meant to blast a new trail was never used. Still crated, it is in a bog behind Williams' now deserted house in Farron. For many years, the treasure lay forgotten. Mrs. Williams corresponded with Baker's widow, but they rarely discussed the treasure that had now cost 3 men their lives. There was an unspoken agreement that Baker's 2 boys would inherit the silver and gold, but tragedy struck when one son perished in the throes of World War II, while the other resided in Europe, harboring no inclination to brave the perils of the Sinbad Desert. Meanwhile, in Provo, William's daughter wed and bore a son, John, who remained oblivious to the lore of Robber's Roost for fear that he might recklessly venture into the treacherous desert. In 1963, surveyors charting the course of Interstate Highway 70 stumbled upon remnants of Baker's plane, sparking a local newspaper headline detailing the discovery of a vintage World War I aircraft in the forlorn expanse of the Sinbad, bearing only a fragmented nameplate containing the letter Sur, Acre, leaving its identity shrouded in mystery. Upon reading the account, the elderly Mrs. Williams discerned that the wreckage was none other than the ill-fated plane of young Baker. For the first time in years, she divulged her late husband's quest for the treasure to her grown grandson, John Maughan. Unsurprisingly, John set off into the desert in pursuit of the elusive treasure. In 1965, a dedicated treasure researcher in Salt Lake City caught wind of John's quest, recognizing that he was onto something significant. She offered to fund a helicopter survey of the area in exchange for the treasure's location, but John adamantly refused. In 1966, I joined the same company as John, and upon learning of my interest in buried treasure, he divulged the tale of the mesas and their concealed riches. We forged a partnership to pursue the treasure, and chartered a plane to survey the region between Green River and Farron. Despite encountering numerous mesas in the vicinity, none matched the description. Undeterred, we procured aerial photographs from the government mapping service, which led us to believe we had pinpointed the site. We journeyed to Utah, scaling the mountains only to find that the mesas, located approximately 25 miles north of Hanksville, were a near-perfect match except for the absence of a lake or depression atop them, and their diminutive size rendered them unsuitable as a viable hiding place. After nearly 2 years of fruitless searching, we sought solace in Provo, where John's mother lamented that she wished she had accompanied her husband to the mesas. Her revelation proved to be the breakthrough we desperately needed. Until then, our search had been confined to the desert between Farron and Green River, but now, a pristine expanse to the south lay open for our exploration. In the cold of February 1969, I got my hands on some detailed topographic maps of the desert near Green River. There, to the southwest of Green River, lay 2 identical flat tops. There was no mistaking it. We had stumbled upon the site. Every detail matched up. The twin mesas stood solitary in an otherwise level terrain. They were sizable, a day's ride from Robber's Roost. Both soared 600 feet straight up from the desert floor, stretching a mile in length and half a mile in width. Come July 1969, John and I ventured to Utah once more in pursuit of the treasure. The correct mesas rest midway between Green River and Hanksville, nestled along State Highway 24, visible from the road as a dirt track winds its way across the desert toward them. While the road posed some sandy stretches, it remained navigable for a standard automobile. After a winding journey of nearly 10 miles, we found ourselves just below the mesas. At their base lay a well, a vital water source for cattle. Setting up camp, we readied our gear and commenced the perilous ascent of the farther mesa the following morning. Armed with canteens, ropes, shovels, and a lightweight metal detector, we grappled with the often sheer walls of the mesa, occasionally having to backtrack. The thin air at such heights made breathing a struggle, but after 3 grueling hours, we conquered the summit. Our expectations were promptly dashed. The sheer scale of the mesa took us by surprise, its top pockmarked with numerous depressions of varying sizes, any of which could have turned into lakes during rainfall. Dividing our efforts, we scoured the mesa for probable treasure locations, yet our modest detector proved insufficient for the mammoth task of combing the entire mesa. Then, near the western edge, John made an electrifying find. Half buried in the sand lay an ancient rusted pistol. Our conviction in having found the right mesas was now unshakable. However, the detector yielded naught further in the immediate vicinity. Late in the afternoon, a thunderstorm drifted over the horizon toward the mesa. Rather than risk getting caught in it, we quickly descended and returned, exhausted, to camp. The next morning we held a conference to decide whether to climb the other mesa. Its walls were even steeper, and there was a chance we would need ropes to scale it. I had seen the top of the mesa from the edge of the other one the day before. The terrain looked similar, containing many depressions which would have to be searched. We elected not to try the ascent. We simply did not have time to survey the entire mountaintop with our small detector. Finding the treasure, which is estimated at $100,000 to $500,000 in value, will involve weeks of work with good detecting equipment. Chances that someone else removed the treasure are remote. 3 people, the Baker brothers and the other pilot, all believed enough in the treasure's authenticity to give their lives searching for it. After the older Baker died, only the Williams and Baker families knew the story. John and I kept the secret until now. With mixed feelings, we left the Sinbad desert. We had at least confirmed the existence of the 2 mesas the story refers to. It will be for others to find the treasure. Utah Valley, an unlikely land for a hidden treasure, harbors a secret mine. This mine's existence predates the arrival of white men in the Great Basin and was known to the Ute Indians for centuries. It patiently awaits rediscovery, nestled within the vicinity of flourishing farms and bustling highways. Centuries ago, Father Silvestre Vélez de Escalante ventured into the rugged Wasatch Mountains, crossing into what he named Timpanogotsis Valley, now known as Utah Valley. In September of 1776, the first white explorer marveled at the precious minerals he encountered there. In his diary, he eloquently described the valley as the most pleasing, beautiful, and fertile site in all New Spain. The eastern Sierras, adorned with rivers, springs, and majestic timber, including royal and other pines, revealed veins teeming with minerals. Although Father Escalante's primary mission was to find a shorter route from Santa Fe to Monterrey and spread Christianity, he couldn't help but notice the abundance of valuable minerals during his travels. As he reached the banks of the Los Animas River, his keen eyes surveyed the landscape, taking in the remnants of a forgotten past. The meadows whispered tales of ancient civilizations, their irrigation ditches now mere vestiges of a once thriving community. Ruins of grand settlements stood as silent witnesses, while the ghostly specters of smelting furnaces hinted at the metals that were once shaped by skilled hands. Before the arrival of the white men, the Indians had known the secrets of gold and silver. Deep in their hearts, they understood the value of these precious metals, long before the Spanish miners ventured into the rugged mountains of New Spain. The footsteps of those who came before were imprinted in the annals of history, like Don Juan Maria de Rivera, who treaded upon these lands in 1761, and Nicolás de la Fora, who followed suit in 1765. But the earliest explorers to set foot in Utah were led by the intrepid Capt. Garcia Lopez de Cardenas in 1540. Although the avowed purpose of these expeditions was to save the souls of the Redskins, the lure of precious metals could not be ignored. The Spanish miners, with their sharp eyes and skilled hands, recognized the untapped wealth hidden within these mountains. They knew that the treasures of gold and silver were waiting patiently for those bold enough to seek them. And seek them they did, for the promise of these riches was a siren song that echoed through the canyons and beckoned the adventurous souls who dared to venture into the unknown. Most of them famous mines were lost to white men forever after the Great Indian Uprising of 1680. The Spanish miners and priests were either killed. As Father Escalante described it, the attacks were fierce, causing great consternation and leading to the ruin and abandonment of Spanish settlements and Christian Indian pueblos on the frontiers. All mining activities came to a halt, resulting in a decrease in royal income and an increase in military expenses. Following the Indian Uprising, there was little mining activity in the northern mountains of the Great Basin until the Escalante expedition of 1776 and the arrival of mountain men and fur trappers 30 years later. Although a few small groups did venture into the region, there are no known records of them rediscovering the fabled lost mines that once filled the vaults of the Spanish king with precious bullion. When the first Mormon immigrants settled in Utah Valley, nestled beneath the towering Sierra de los Timpanogotsis, they sought to till the land and cultivate a new life. However, they soon discovered that the land held more than just fertile soil. Arriving in Mexican territory in 1847, the Mormons frequently witnessed Spanish mule trains laden with precious ore traversing Spanish Fork Canyon. One settler, Mormon V. Selman, vividly recalled an encounter with such a train in 1852. The mules carried burdens that seemed disproportionate to their size, but were undoubtedly laden with valuable cargo. The Mexicans guarded their camp fiercely, allowing no one to approach. Rumors circulated that Indians had attacked the men near Chicken Creek, stealing the mules and their mysterious cargo. Yet the settlers suspected foul play, for the Indians possessed fine horses and had no need for mules. It was widely believed that white men disguised as Indians sought to lay claim to the precious contents concealed within those enigmatic packs. During those days of the Old West, when the land was wild and untamed, the sight of Mexican or Spanish pack trains was a common occurrence for us pioneers. But let me tell you, not all those Spaniards were up to any good. Some of them had a dark side, stealing Indian children to sell them off as slaves in Santa Fe. In the year 1852, a Spanish pack train, maybe the very one Selman spoke of, met its match in Spanish Fork Canyon. Marshal William H. Kimball, a man of justice, stopped them dead in their tracks. You see, these miners had been caught red-handed, for they had those stolen Indian children with them. The packers confessed that they had taken these poor souls from a camp close to the mines where they were howling that precious silver ore. It was a camp on the Provo River, not far from the mighty Mount Timpanogos. Brigham Young, the prophet of the Mormons, had laid down the law in the new territory. Slavery was forbidden, and Young made sure of it. Within just a few short years, you wouldn't find those Mexican or Spanish slavers in Utah Valley anymore. Young knew that mining and the search for riches could bring a swarm of outsiders, threatening to overrun his small group of pioneers. He warned his followers time and again not to go chasing after those lost mines. "I can stand right here in my own doorway and see the riches of the earth, gold and silver gleaming in the distance," he once said in 1849. But the time ain't right for the saints to dig for gold. Our first duty is to cultivate the land, to harness its agricultural resources. As for the treasures buried deep in the earth, let them be. Let them rest while we tend to the soil. The Spanish pack trains slowly disappeared from Utah Valley, no longer seen in the rugged terrain. The stolen Indian children were set free, and the lost mines remained hidden, their secrets locked away in the depths of the earth. Young's cautionary words echoed in the hearts of his followers, reminding them to focus on the path of righteousness and the cultivation of the land, rather than the allure of untold riches. One of the earliest settlements in Utah Valley emerged at Mountainville, now known as Alpine. These brave pioneers faced countless hardships as they toiled on the unforgiving rocky soil, but their determination prevailed. Over time, their dairy herds flourished and orchards bloomed, bringing prosperity to the community. The settlers marveled at the silver-lead ore the local Indians would bring from the treacherous canyons of Mount Timpanogos. It was used to fashion bullets and crude ornaments. However, they heeded Brigham Young's cautionary words and refrained from pursuing the Indians' hidden treasure. For those who contemplated such a quest, Young's visit to Mountainville dispelled their curiosity. He acknowledged the wealth within the mountains, but emphasized that it was not yet time for its discovery. As the pioneers settled into their newfound security, thoughts of the Indians' secret mines began to occupy their minds. They wondered if the source of the Indians' ore was the same as the one the Spaniards had once extracted from. Yet, despite their curiosity, attempts to follow the Indians into the wild canyons proved fruitless. Other endeavors to extract the secret's whereabouts from the Indians were equally unsuccessful. The hidden mines remained just that, hidden. The farmer named Hall had befriended an old Indian who, in his twilight years, shared a meager clue with his benefactor. But the Indian's words were enigmatic, for he would only say, "You will find it only if a big fire comes, or if a flood washes out of the canyon." What did he mean? Was he implying that the hidden mine or ledge lay concealed beneath a thick cover of brush or timber, waiting to be revealed by a forest fire? Or perhaps the entrance was obscured by rocks, only to be exposed by a mighty flood? The answer eluded everyone. However, the search need not be an arduous one, for the settlers agreed on one point: the Indians always departed Mountainville in the late afternoon, likely to deter pursuit. Yet, they unfailingly returned by noon the following day, laden with as much silver-lead ore as they could carry. And their path always led to the deep canyons on the western slopes of Mount Timpanogos. Some fortunate men had followed them into American Fork Canyon, only to lose their trail amidst the labyrinthine ravines and side canyons. Most mining experts concurred that the canyons of Mount Timpanogos offered unparalleled potential for the discovery of mineral veins. In the vicinity, the Alta mining district, a few miles to the north, had yielded vast riches from renowned mines like the Emma. Nearby districts such as Park City and Eureka had also gained worldwide recognition as prosperous silver camps. The allure of untold wealth lay within reach, concealed within the rugged embrace of these canyons. In the untamed 1870s and 1880s, when adventure was the currency of the land, a tale of riches and lost treasures unfolded in the heart of American Fork Canyon. Nestled at the mouth of Mary Ellen Gulch, just west of the desolate Graveyard Flat, a humble mining camp named Forest City emerged. Its rise to prominence was fueled by the Aspinwall Mining Co. of New York, who invested a staggering $400,000 to construct the narrow-gauge American Fork Railroad, connecting the camp to the illustrious Sultana smelter. Forest City became a beacon of hope as mines like the Wild Dutchman, Live Yankee, Bell Orphan, and Miller's Hill yielded small fortunes from a complex limestone ore, rich in glittering gold and shimmering silver. But these treasures paled in comparison to the elusive bounty hidden within the secret Indian mine. Alas, it lay far from the grasp of Mountainville, a place where a man could venture out at dusk, fill his pockets with untold wealth, and return before the sun reached its zenith. Now little remains of the once thriving Forest City. The mines that once echoed with the sound of progress are now nothing more than collapsed tunnels, swallowed by nature's embrace. Tourists flock to American Fork Canyon, drawn by the allure of the renowned Timpanogos Cave, oblivious to the multitude of unexplored caverns that lie hidden in the depths. Could it be that the old Indian's cryptic words alluded to one of these uncharted realms? Did he speak of a cave that only fire or a raging flood could reveal? Or perhaps Brigham Young's warning, whispered in caution, still holds true: the time for its discovery has not yet come. Somewhere, a mere few hours' hike from the faded memories of old Mountainville, lies the answer. In one of the treacherous canyons strewn with rugged boulders, at the foot of the majestic Mount Timpanogos, there exists a ledge, a forgotten mine, or perchance an ore vein concealed within the sanctuary of a hidden cave. It was a place where the Indian tribes once toiled, extracting the precious silver-lead ore that held the promise of wealth beyond measure. Its existence predates the arrival of Father Escalante in Utah Valley, and it remains steadfast to this day. But where, you may ask? As the wise Spanish saying goes, "Quién sabe?" Who knows? Only the land itself holds the secret, waiting patiently for those bold enough to seek the truth buried within the ancient canyons and timeless peaks.
When someone mentions Ghost Town, do you picture some desolate desert place where fragile board shanties burned black by a scorching sun stand half buried in drifting sand? If you do, you're not thinking of the century-old logging camp ghost towns of Utah's Uinta Mountains. Hidden deep in a green pine forest, close to a crystal-clear trout stream, these gems of the high country are more like picture postcard vacation scenes than they are ghost towns. But they are ghost towns just the same. Once they boasted stores and saloons and rang with laughter and shouts. People lived there and some died there. Today, century-old log cabins are all that remain. Everyone is gone now, except the ghosts and the little treasures they guard, so they must be ghost towns, even if there aren't any sand dunes or hot desert winds. During the 1870s, the wild, unmapped Utah-Wyoming border country was the scene of the West's most unusual logging operation. As the rails of the Union Pacific were pushed ever further into the western deserts, the problem of obtaining cross ties for its heavy rails became ever more troublesome. The mountains which separated the two future states were heavily timbered, but miles of desert-like wasteland separated them from the railroad. In order to bring the timber and the railroad together, the Great Hilliard Flume was built. While laying their steel ribbons across the treeless wastes of Wyoming, Union Pacific engineers were constantly taunted by the sight of great stands of pine timber far to the south along the crests of Utah's Uinta Mountains. All across Wyoming, the forests stood distant and inaccessible, but as the rails turned southward into Utah, the mountains drew nearer, and timber cruisers were sent to explore them. The reports they brought back gave birth to the wild and woolly timber camps that are today's ghosts of the Uintas. Timber had been cut on the northern slopes of the Uintas as early as 1867. But it wasn't until the rails approached the future site of present-day Evanston that logging began on a large scale. Through the winters of 1867 to 68, tie hackers cut and trimmed ties high on the wind-swept 10,000-foot peaks, waiting for the floodwaters of spring to float them to the desert valleys below, where the railroad was being graded. The spring runoffs came on schedule, carrying along great numbers of ties in its foaming fury. But thousands were left high and dry as the runoff subsided, and at least 2 men had been drowned trying to float them to the end of the track. A surer and safer way of moving the ties was needed, and as if in answer to a prayer, W.K. Sloan arrived on the scene. Sloan proposed construction of a giant flume to carry ties and saw logs from the forests to the railroad. To build a flume for so great a distance across a dry wasteland seemed like madness to the railroad workers, and they jeeringly called his idea Sloan's folly. But undaunted by their ridicule, Sloan organized the Hilliard Flume and Lumber Company and began construction. It cost him $200,000, but it was repaid many times over by the millions of ties, saw logs, mine props, and countless cords of kiln lumber it carried. Sloan's flume was built in a V shape, with sides 30 inches high, of whipsawed planks 12 inches wide and 3 inches thick. It took 80 tons of heavy square spikes to build it, and when it was finished, it was 30 miles long. Most of its length snaked across dry, sage-covered flats where no timber grew, but Sloan had planned well. High on the crest of Gold Hill, near the headwaters of the Bear River, on a stream which would soon become known as Mill City Creek, he built a sawmill and a diversion dam to turn the creek's water into the flume. As the flume lengthened, timber for its construction was carried, from the sawmill to its terminus by the flume itself. The further the flume progressed, the more men were needed to cut timber to build and maintain it. Not far below the sawmill, a rough and rowdy timber camp sprang up. Naturally enough, it was called Mill City, and it wasn't long until it boasted a population of 500 lumberjacks, sawyers, and roughnecks. It had a company store, boarding houses, and scores of log cabins, many of which can still be found today. Their ruins, half hidden in the pines, hold dozens of little treasures, from lost or forgotten caches to old bottle dumps. Judging from the number of sun-purpled whiskey bottles being found by relic hunters, and from the tales of wild times told by old-timers, Mill City must have had a well-patronized saloon also. The Hilliard Flume ran from high on Gold Hill down Mill City to the west side of Hayden's Fork of the Bear River, which it followed downstream to where it crossed the river at the confluence of the East Fork. It followed the larger river for 2 miles more before angling off across the dry, sage-covered hills, heading for Hilliard, then only a whistle stop on the railroad. Often it crossed log trestles, as high as 16 feet above the ground, to keep it at the necessary grade, and its sections fitted so well that hardly a drop of water was lost. Its grade was designed so that water flowed through it as 15 miles an hour, carrying logs placed in it at Mill City to Hilliard in only 2 hours. When the last heavy planks were spiked into place and it began carrying a steady stream of saw logs and lumber into Hilliard, no one seemed to remember that once they had called it Sloan's Folly. So well did the flume do its job that Hilliard soon became a major lumber shipping point on the railroad. In addition to ties, the flume carried countless thousands of mine props and other timber for the mining camps of Utah and Nevada. At that time, most of the mines used charcoal to fire their smelters, and the Hilliard area also became a major producer of charcoal. There were 32 beehive-shaped charcoal ovens at Hilliard, as well as 4 others at nearby Piedmont and 2 more on Sulphur Creek. The kilns at Piedmont, long since a ghost town, still stand. Be sure to see them. The site of Piedmont, located near Evanston, is shown on most oil company road maps, with a host of sawmills at its terminus to consume every saw log, and with rows of charcoal ovens waiting to devour every scrap of wood left over. Lumberjacks at Mill City were kept busy keeping the flume filled to capacity. To feed the voracious appetite of the mills and ovens, a second flume 6 miles long, known as the Howe Feeder, was built up the Stillwater Fork from near its junction with Hayden's Fork. Logs coming down the Howe Feeder were caught in a mill pond and then fed into the main flume. To avoid log jams along the 36 miles of flume, lookouts were stationed where they could see for miles in each direction and could signal maintenance men by means of a heliograph. A second timber camp, remembered as Stillwater Camp, blossomed near the head of the Howe Feeder, while a large commissary camp was built across the ridge in the next canyon on Black's Fork. Bunkhouses and bachelor cabins were built among the pines at Stillwater Camp, but little remains today except for part of the old camp at the head of the diversion dam at the Noath end of Cletting Peak. But the old commissary camp on Black's Fork is a ghost town gem. The camp on Black's Fork was an outfitting or commissary camp serving all of the timber camps in the mountains beyond. Black's Fork was built in a circular shape, much like the old forts mountain men built. Large horse barns, company offices, and a post office and store saloon were located in the center of a mountain meadow, surrounded by a circle of log cabins. It still looks pretty much today like it did nearly a century ago, except grass now grows on once busy roadways and the encroaching pine forest threatens to bury the aged cabins under a blanket of green. Like spokes from the hub of a wheel, wagon roads radiated out from Black's Fork to timber camps in the mountains beyond. Besides the camps at Mill City and Stillwater, loggers also built a now nearly forgotten camp on the West Fork of Black's Fork. The way to the West Fork camp is better given after the road to Black's Fork is described. To reach Black's Fork, take State Road 150 from Evanston southward into Utah. 6 miles after crossing the state line, it's marked. A rough dirt road turns to the left, east. Follow it for 19 miles to the Black's Fork River, then turn left, or downstream, for 2 miles to the old town site. Even though the road is rough in places, you'll be glad you came. Wandering among the old cabins, wondering about the people who live there is a rare experience. You can camp wherever you please and don't forget your fishing pole and camera. The river is only a stone's throw away, and the trout are always hungry. And shutterbugs will love the old cabins half hidden in the pines. Be sure to note your speedometer mileage when you leave SR 150, and remember the crossroad 151.2 miles from the highway. The road straight ahead leads to Black's Fork, but the left fork goes to Lyman Lake, only about a half mile away. It is an excellent camping and fishing area, and you may decide to camp there while exploring the ghost camps of the Uintas. The right fork, rocky and rough, follows the West Fork upstream, where, with a little luck, you can find the old West Fork camp. Follow the West Fork Road upstream. It is rough in places and is nearly impassable for a low-slung passenger car. Watch your speedometer carefully and at exactly 51.2 miles from the crossroad leading to Lyman Lake. And just before you cross the West Fork, stop and park by the river. Be sure to spend a few minutes walking carefully along the riverbank, for if you do, you'll see hundreds of small mountain trout and perhaps a beaver also. During early morning and in the evenings, deer and elk often feed in the meadows along the river. Hike into the timber on the roadside of the river, not across the stream. Watch carefully for signs of old trails. It's not steep, and in about a quarter mile you should start seeing old cabins, some green with moss and almost buried under a green pine blanket. Cabins, barns, and unknown log structures are hidden over a half mile of forest. But if you watch closely, you'll see a dozen or more cabins in a nearly straight line, almost like the main street of a small town. This is the center of the old West Fork timber camp. Rusted remnants of tools, broken pieces of old-fashioned wood stoves, and long discarded logging equipment are strewn through the underbrush, while hundreds of pieces of broken pottery and bottles mark the cabin sites. Perhaps if you're lucky, as I was, you might find an old stone whiskey crock from the Oak Saloon at Evanston. The road to Old Mill City is easier. Instead of leaving SR 150 as described, continue southward 51.2 miles past the Black's Fork Road, or about 111.2 miles south of the Utah border, and watch for a sign at a forest road leading to the right, west, pointing the way to Gold Hill. The ruins of Mill City are 4 miles from the pavement. Only a few cabins and part of the diversion dam remain, hardly a hint of the camp that once was. You'll have to hike to reach the ancient silver-gray cabins and wooden diversion dam at the north end of Cletting Peak, which was once part of the Stillwater Camp area. Park your vehicle by the side of Hayden's Fork about a mile south of the Gold Hill Road. Wade the shallow creek and climb the pine slope beyond. Be sure to watch for moose, for the willows along the creek are a favorite feeding place for them. Atop the ridge which divides Hayden's Fork from the Stillwater Fork, you'll come onto a mountain trail and soon begin seeing sections of the old V-shaped flume. It's the only place any of the old flume remains, and if you're a collector of square nails and spikes, you should have no trouble finding pockets full of them in the pine needles beneath the rotting timbers. The old cabins are about a mile further up the ridge. You can't get lost, just follow the flume to them. During the years that the Hilliard Flume and Lumber Company prospered, the logging camps it supported prospered also. Few records were kept at Mill City, but old-timers recall that it was a tough camp. There was no forest service then to prevent uncontrolled timber cutting, and no law enforcement to control the exuberance of its rough lumberjacks. Like any isolated mountain camp with 500 men and no women, but with plenty of whiskey, fights were a daily fare. Who knows how many little treasures were left behind by men who cashed in their chips unexpectedly. And at the other end of the flume, Hilliard had its share of toughs also, but being on the railroad and perhaps more civilized, its fights were settled with 6 guns instead of axes. There is even less record of what life was like at Stillwater or West Fork. But it couldn't have been easy. At a 10,000 feet elevation where winter snows buried even 2-story cabins. Timber cutters had to have their timber cut by spring to take advantage of the high runoff in the small mountain creeks, so they had no choice except to work during the harsh Utah winters. No doubt cabin fever drove some nearly mad, and fights often erupted. I've heard of several killings at the Stillwater camp, and it is said that many died of smallpox at Black's Fork. If so, I've never found any such record nor found any cemetery. In time, the demand for railroad ties lessened, and coal from newly found lodes replaced charcoal. Gradually, the great forests at the head of the Bear River fell before the woodsman's axe, and the sawmills began closing. In 1885, the last mill whistle sounded, and the great Hilliard Flume lay idle. But even after years of use and making a fortune for its owners, it wasn't allowed to die peacefully. Its heavy planking was salvaged and taken to Hilliard and Evanston, where buildings and homes were built from it, some of them still in use. Today, Hilliard is only a group of weth-eared ranch buildings, while Evanston, once its suburb, is a first-class city. Today, a quiet walk among the silent pines and aspens along the Bear River reveals log cribbings and rotting trestles over which the Hilliard asterisk flume once ran. A line of rusting square spikes still marks its course, where a careful searcher may still find a broken axe head or perhaps a sun-purpled bottle. And if you listen closely, the sigh of the wind in the pines sounds almost like the rush of water carrying logs down the great flume once more. Maybe it isn't the wind, but only the ghosts of the winters, keeping their lonely watch over the camps that were built as a monument to Sloane's folly, the great Hilliard Flume.
Venturing into the heart of Nevada for a gamble unlike any other doesn't require a single ante. The stakes at play exceed a staggering $1.5 million, composed of gold coins, nuggets, and silver, some of which have appreciated substantially over time, rendering the estimate conservative. This treasure hunt doesn't unfold amidst the glitz of the Las Vegas Strip, but takes you to the rugged beauty of Red Rock Canyon, a short jaunt away. In this remote landscape, nestled in the annals of April 1858, lies a tale steeped in both historical archives and legend. It recounts a band of renegade Paiute Indians who, having ambushed and vanquished a Mormon wagon train en route to San Bernardino, California, concealed an astonishing treasure. Following the plunder's burial, Chief Swift Hawk, their leader, conducted a solemn ghost dance, sanctifying the treasure to the tribe and invoking a potent curse upon any who dared disturb its resting place. Swift Hawk etched directions to the cache into a petroglyph, confident in the curse's protective veil and the Paiutes' reluctance to aid outsiders. To this day, the enigmatic petroglyph remains impervious to nature's erosive forces and the relentless pursuit of treasure hunters. Yet the key to unlocking its secrets may lie in deciphering its cryptic message. Delving into the origins of the $1.5 million buried in Red Rock Canyon necessitates a journey back over a century to the turbulent era of the Mormon War. Amidst the strife, Brigham Young's clandestine militia, the Danites, clashed with Gentiles traversing Mormon territory in Utah. The pinnacle of this conflict came on the fateful morning of September 7, 1857, with the Mountain Meadows Massacre, a harrowing event that sparked national outrage and drew the ire of President Buchanan towards the Mormons. Though historical consensus implicates John D. Lee, a Latter-day Saint and government Indian agent, in orchestrating the massacre, direct evidence remains elusive. Lee's execution in 1877, however, brought forth a confession revealing the extent of his involvement alongside the Danites and indigenous allies. While Brigham Young's culpability remains a subject of debate, His tacit approval of the massacre is unmistakable, evidenced by his subsequent rewards to Lee. In a chilling revelation, Brigham Young absolved the atrocity as a divine decree, urging secrecy among the faithful and shifting blame onto the indigenous population. Despite Young's efforts, President Buchanan remained unconvinced, already privy to reports implicating the Mormons in the massacre. Thus, the echoes of treachery and tragedy reverberate through the annals of history, casting a shadow over the untold riches concealed within the rugged expanse of Red Rock Canyon. Eastern newspapers eagerly disseminated copies of the letter, stoking fervor for a punitive expedition against the Mormons and clamoring for Brigham Young's hanging. In early March 1858, Young received clandestine intelligence from his confidant, Colonel Thomas L. Kane, revealing that a formidable U.S. cavalry force under Brigadier General Albert Sidney Johnston was poised to invade Salt Lake City. On March 10th, Young convened the church elders, announcing his plan to evacuate the city, urging obedience with the assertion, "I am your leader, Latter-day Saints, and you must follow me." Expressing a commitment to preserving life, Young outlined a strategic departure, presenting a choice between confrontation and flight. Declaring his intent to lead the Mormons to a vast undisclosed desert territory, Young issued precise directives. Urged to gather essential belongings, including farm tools, livestock, and salvaged house fixtures, Mormons were instructed to rendezvous at a designated assembly point. Each individual was tasked with bringing forth their personal wealth in gold and silver, to be safeguarded by armed Danites and transported in wagons. Amidst this orchestrated exodus, over $1.5 million in treasure amassed at the collection point, guarded by a contingent of 40 Danites led by Captain Josiah Sitterly, a former U.S. Army officer. Embarking on their journey southwestward, the treasure-laden wagons, under the supervision of veteran wagon boss Everett Wright, aimed to reach a secluded cave in eastern Nevada as per Young's orders. The initial leg of the journey transpired without incident as the convoy reached the designated cave, pausing for respite as they awaited further instructions from Young. Subsequently directed to proceed to San Bernardino, the treasure train encountered trepidation among its ranks due to unfamiliar terrain and scarce water sources. As the journey progressed, the terrain grew increasingly rugged, water supplies dwindled, and exhaustion set in among both man and beast. Faced with parched throats and dehydrated bodies, the decision to halt was imperative. Sitterly, recognizing the perilous predicament, opted to lead a party in search of water, leaving a small contingent behind to guard the wagons. Despite assurances of safety from hostile forces, the challenges of the unforgiving landscape posed an ominous threat to the survival of the expedition. With dwindling provisions and the uncertain promise of relief, the fate of the treasure train hung precariously in the balance. The initial optimism proved to be unfounded. The horses, exhausted beyond measure, struggled to proceed, and the anticipated spring yielded only a meager trickle, a heartbreaking disappointment. 4 long days passed before Sitterly returned to the encampment, greeted by a scene of horror. Buzzards feasted on the mutilated corpses of Wright, his teamsters, and the Danite sentinels. Swift Hawk, leading a large war party of renegade Paiutes, had launched a surprise attack, leaving evidence of a fierce struggle strewn about. Despite valiant efforts, the Mormons were overwhelmed. Surveying the grim aftermath, Sitterly resolved to exact swift retribution. His heart weighed heavy not only with the loss of life, but also with dread at facing the wrath of Brigham Young for the failure to safeguard the entrusted treasure. With no time for proper burial rites, he urged the weary Danites to press on, pursuing the Paiutes southward towards Muddy Peak. As the pursuit unfolded, signs of Paiute desperation emerged. Stricken mules littered the trail burdened with stolen treasure, hinting at the assailants' plight. Sitterly's confidence swelled as his foresight seemed validated, anticipating a decisive confrontation on the morrow. Yet, the night brought a fiery reckoning. The distant glow of flames heralded the destruction of their wagons, a cruel blow delivered by the retreating Paiutes. Arriving at the scene of devastation, the Danites found naught but charred remnants and the sickening stench of death. Desecrated bodies bore witness to the savagery of the conflict. Undeterred, the Danites pressed on, following the Paiutes' trail into the forbidding Red Rock Canyon. Aware of the impending danger, Sitterly navigated the treacherous terrain with caution, recognizing the Paiutes' advantage in their familiar surroundings. Despite his vigilance, the Paiutes sprung a deadly ambush, triggering a catastrophic cascade of boulders and a hail of arrows and bullets. In the chaos, Sitterl's valiant stand was cut short, his life extinguished by enemy fire. The Danites fought bravely, but the Paiutes' relentless assault claimed all but 3 survivors. Amidst the carnage, David Mullen, Thomas Brabant, and Elihu Hausner made desperate bids for escape, their bodies eventually discovered, marking the tragic conclusion of the ill-fated pursuit. 4 days elapsed before the carnage was stumbled upon by Transito Fernandez, a sheep rancher scouring the area for predatory mountain lions. Amidst his hunt, Fernandez encountered the grisly aftermath, where scalped bodies lay bloated and lifeless. Crossing himself in solemn reverence, Fernandez, cognizant of the futility of aiding the deceased, prioritized the immediate threat posed by the marauding mountain lion terrorizing his ranch. Continuing his trek, Fernandez stumbled upon the tomahawked remains of Brabant and Hausner, further evidence of the harrowing events that unfolded. Following the trail of the mountain lion, Fernandez's journey led him to the grievously wounded Mullen, whose feverish account of the massacre offered grim insight into the tragic ordeal. Urging Fernandez to relay the dire news to Brigham Young, Mullen's final plea underscored the magnitude of the calamity. Guiding a posse back to the scene, Fernandez led the search for survivors and clues, but the Paiutes had long since vanished, retreating into the remote Castle Mountains to evade retaliation. Though the petroglyph and ceremonial remnants hinted at the Paiutes' involvement, the true extent of their actions remained shrouded in mystery. Months passed, and the desolate Red Rock Canyon became a haunting reminder of the tragedy, avoided by both settlers and indigenous alike. However, in 1860, fate intervened in the form of Gustav Wilhelms, a German immigrant whose chance discovery of gold coins in the canyon altered the course of his journey. Abandoning their plans for California, the Wilhelms settled temporarily on the mesa, driven by the allure of newfound wealth. As Wilhelms and his wife embarked on their treasure hunt, Fitzgerald, intrigued by their discovery, probed for further information, learning of the gold's origin. Despite Wilhelm's assurance of the canyon's depletion, Fitzgerald's curiosity remained unabated. Tragedy struck once more as the Wilhelms perished in the unforgiving expanse of the Mojave Desert, their quest for riches ending in despair. Meanwhile, Fitzgerald and Stevens, undeterred by the perils, ventured into Red Rock Canyon, driven by the promise of untold riches. Yet their pursuit ended in tragedy, as Stevens fell victim to a fatal snakebite, succumbing to the venom despite desperate attempts to save him. Thus, the saga of Red Rock Canyon continued, a testament to the allure of wealth and the perils lurking within its rugged expanse. Salt Lake City, Utah, nestled in the northern part of the state, serves as the county seat of Salt Lake County. Positioned along the Jordan River, just 13 miles east of the Great Salt Lake, the city was founded in 1847 by Mormon pioneers led by Brigham Young. Today, it remains the central headquarters of the Mormon Church. During the gold rush, Salt Lake City became a crucial stop on the trail to California. In the 1860s, Frank Woolley was working out of Salt Lake City when Mormon leaders appointed him as an administrator within the Zion Cooperative, an organization that provided farm products and cattle to mining camps in California and Nevada. In the spring of 1869, while returning home to St. George, Utah from California, Woolley was tragically killed by Native Americans at Cajun Pass. He was carrying $20,000 in gold coins hidden at the bottom of 2 water barrels, which possibly remains undiscovered. Woolley's responsibilities included sending wagon loads of fresh produce and herds of cattle across the country to areas in need. Payments for these goods were kept in a San Francisco bank until Woolley or his agents retrieved them. In March 1869, Woolley embarked on a trip to California to collect the money. Traveling along the old Spanish Trail from Salt Lake City to Sacramento with a large wagon train of produce, Woolley made his deliveries before heading directly to San Francisco. There, he withdrew a substantial sum in gold coins, surprising bank officials with his preference for the heavy metal over more convenient paper currency. Woolley then traveled to Los Angeles by steamship, where he had arranged for protection on his return journey to Utah. Residing in St. George in southern Utah, This route through Los Angeles was much shorter than the overland trek from San Francisco to Salt Lake City, and then south to St. George. After waiting a day in Los Angeles, Woolley learned that the wagon train had departed a day earlier. He purchased a mule and set off to catch up. 2 days later, Woolley arrived in San Bernardino, California, a town founded by Mormons in 1851, located 55 miles east of Los Angeles at the intersection of present-day Interstates 10 and 15. Here, he faced a crucial decision about which route to take to reach the Mojave River. The river crosses Cajon Pass near modern-day Victorville, with its source about 90 miles to the north. Woolley decided to head north, stopping at Dunlap's ranch for a meal and information before continuing his fateful journey. The Dunlaps informed Woolley that no wagon trains had passed through in recent weeks. The next morning, Woolley continued east and entered the Cajon Pass, now I-15. About 8 miles from Dunlap's, he unexpectedly encountered a group of Paiute Indians driving a herd of stolen horses. Woolley dismounted and approached them, attempting to engage in conversation. Once the Paiutes realized he was traveling alone, they decided to kill him. Sensing their intentions, Woolley tried to escape, but the Paiutes quickly caught up with him, shooting arrows until he fell from his mule, mortally wounded. They then dragged his body into a nearby ravine, stripping it of clothing and equipment, and took his mule and belongings with them. Later that afternoon, the wagon train Woolley had intended to join reached the Mojave River. Traveling slowly, they expected Woolley to catch up within a few days and left a man at the river to wait for him. When Woolley failed to appear, the man retraced the trail, speaking to local ranchers near what is now Victorville. Eventually, he reached Dunlap's ranch, where Woolley had last been seen on March 20th. Fearing the worst, local ranchers quickly organized a search party. The next day, they discovered the site of Woolley's murder and found his decomposing body in the ravine. A metal casket was brought from San Bernardino, and Woolley's remains were transported to St. George, Utah for burial. At the time, no one searched for Woolley's money, as he hadn't mentioned the gold coins he was carrying to anyone, including the Dunlaps. A few weeks after Woolley's belongings arrived in St. George, a receipt from the San Francisco bank was delivered, revealing that he had been transporting a substantial sum of money when he was killed. Realizing the importance of recovering the lost fortune, the Zion Cooperative sent 5 men to California to retrace Woolley's steps. They followed his trail, questioning ranchers and settlers under the guise of being executors of Woolley's estate, gathering information about his final days. Their investigation led them to the general store where Woolley had purchased a mule and supplies, including a peculiar item, a square yard of green cowhide. As the group passed through Cajon Pass, they sought assistance from the military garrison commander at Victorville to apprehend Woolley's murderers. The captain agreed, assigning 12 soldiers to assist in the search. They rounded up and questioned several Paiute bands along the Mojave River, eventually finding Woolley's branded mule at an Indian encampment. Convinced they had found the killers, they disarmed the group and demanded the surrender of the guilty men. The Paiutes held a brief council before handing over the culprits. A search of the camp revealed some of Woolley's belongings, but the missing money was nowhere to be found. Through an interpreter, the searchers questioned each Indian involved, but none admitted to finding any money among Woolley's possessions. However, they did confess to leaving 2 5-gallon wooden water barrels near Woolley's body, likely unaware of the hidden treasure they contained. The Mormons speculated that Woolley had purchased the green cowhide to wrap around the gold coins. By soaking the raw cowhide in water, placing the coins inside, and allowing it to dry, the hide would shrink tightly around the money, forming a secure package. These compact bundles, each weighing about 30 pounds, could then be hidden at the bottom of the water barrels, making them nearly impossible to detect. The soldiers and the Mormon search party returned to the site of the murder and meticulously combed the area, but they found no trace of the water barrels or the gold coins. The Mormons eventually returned to Salt Lake City and filed a report on their findings. The details of Woolley's story were published in the Los Angeles Star and the High Desert News. For years after the incident, the Mormons quietly searched the area, whenever one of their wagon trains crossed the Mojave Desert into San Bernardino, hoping to find Woolley's lost gold. Despite their efforts, the treasure seemed to have simply disappeared. Over time, the story of Woolley's gold became a cherished oral tradition in southern Utah, passed down through generations. The St. George newspaper, the Daily Spectrum, has revisited the tale multiple times over the past 50 years, dedicating almost a full page to it in a special anniversary edition. They estimated the value of the lost gold at $35,000, noting that the price of gold had recently risen from $20 an ounce to $35. Today, that same gold would be worth over $500,000. Now, Interstate 15 runs through the Cajun Pass, connecting San Bernardino with Victorville and Barstow. Somewhere, perhaps just off the road in a small ravine, those 60 pounds of gold coins might still be hidden. Will they remain undiscovered forever, or will they one day make a fortunate treasure hunter financially secure for life? For over a century, Park City has been renowned as Utah's top silver camp. However, even as far back as 1868, when silver was first uncovered in the area, it was known that the Wasatch Range also contained gold, and there's reason to believe that the richest treasure of all remains hidden in the brush-choked mountain canyons above Park City. A legendary gold ledge, once discovered by a man whose tragic death kept its location a mystery until recent years. While Park City's silver mines made many fortunes, there was always enough gold mixed in the ore to keep miners wondering where it came from. The Thunderer claims in Empire Canyon, later renamed the American Flag Mine, were early producers of gold, as was the Constellation Mine near Ontario Canyon. But the most significant gold finds came from Snake Creek Canyon. Near the top of the rough, boulder-strewn canyon, miners discovered float ore threaded with wire gold, assaying at an astounding $23,000 per ton. The ore came from the relief claims owned by Colonel Nicholas Truick, who also operated the Wabash Mine. Despite their efforts, Truick's men were never able to locate the source of the rich ore. Somewhere hidden in the rugged ledges and loose rock slides of the canyon, the mother lode of gold remained lost, and soon as the silver boom consumed the camp, the discovery in Snake Creek was forgotten. Then, in 1893, a strange and eerie story was reported in the Park City Record. Two prospectors, exploring an abandoned mine shaft, came across the skeleton of a man in a side tunnel. Nearby, they found a rusty lunchbox marked with the initials RS. Inside the box were samples of pure gold ore, so rich that the yellow metal gleamed brightly against the white quartz. Along with the gold, there was a crumbling piece of paper. Though much of it was unreadable, some words could still be deciphered. "Dear God, I am dying. I have found wealth at the cost of my life. The samples. 1. My hand trembles. I am." This incredible discovery sounded like a tale spun from fiction, but it was published by Sam Radden, the respected editor of the record. Radden, an expert in mining, personally examined both the ore samples and the fragile note. His reputation ensured that no one doubted the story, then or now. The discovery brought back memories for the old-timers of Park City. They recalled the high-grade float ore found years earlier on Colonel Truick's property in Snake Creek Canyon. Experts quickly confirmed that the gold in the lunchbox didn't match the surrounding rock where the skeleton was found. The theory emerged that the man, perhaps returning from a successful prospecting trip, fell into the shaft one night. Badly injured and unable to escape, he crawled into the side drift, leaving behind the gold and the note as his final testament. Given the similarities between the gold in the lunchbox and the float ore from Snake Creek Canyon, many believed this unfortunate man had found the long-lost Snake Creek ledge. It would be another half-century before the next clue to this enduring mystery would emerge. Just a few years ago, a man from the East arrived in Park City, asking questions about a long-lost relative. According to his story, this relative was a drifter named Trueheart Manlove, a prospector who had ventured west in search of fortune. Years passed without any word from Manlove, until his eastern relatives unexpectedly received a letter. In it, Manlove excitedly shared that he had discovered a rich gold ledge near Henry's Fork, not far from Park City, Utah. He urged them to join him quickly. While they were still deciding, Another letter arrived from Manlove, this time more desperate. He pleaded with them to hurry, explaining that he had lost the ledge and needed help to find it again. He claimed that after making his discovery, he had gone into town for supplies. While he was away, a forest fire swept through Henry's Fork, completely altering the landscape and erasing the familiar landmarks. Despite searching for weeks through the rough, broken terrain where he believed the gold ledge to be, Manlove was unable to recognize any of the places he once knew. The relatives ultimately chose not to join him, and over time, they lost contact with Manlove altogether. How, where, or when he died was never clear to them. It wasn't until this Easterner, claiming to be Manlove's relative, came to Park City asking questions that the story of his rich strike became known. However, the man's tale was met with skepticism. There was no place called Henry's Fork in the Park City mining district, though there was a McHenry's Canyon south of town, between the city and Snake Creek. No one could recall a forest fire either. Most people in Park City dismissed the Easterner's story as a hoax. Still, some wondered why anyone would travel all that way to chase a non-existent relative. It wasn't until this writer began researching Park City's history in recent years that the connection between Manlove's story and other local legends started to surface. The tale of the skeleton in the abandoned shaft, the rich gold samples found with it, and the fabulous gold float discovered in Snake Creek Canyon had largely been forgotten, but it started to sound familiar to today's residents. Modern mining operations have since reached deep underground in Snake Creek and McHenry Canyon, uncovering ore rich in gold. It was at these deep levels that miners found silver deposits transitioning into high-grade gold. Perhaps somewhere, there is a hidden vein that stretches to the surface, the very ledge Trueheart Manlove had once discovered. Perhaps in those pine-covered canyons, high above where miners dig today, a ledge of white quartz streaked with yellow wire gold still gleams in the sun, waiting to be found.